Red alert. All hands stand to battle stations. Lay in and intercept course to the Romulan ship.
Shields up, load all torpedo bays. Stand by phasers.
Warp factor 8. Engage.
Hello and welcome to Top Linux Tech. Today we are taking a look at the Deepin 20 that has been just released a couple of days ago. And as you may or may not know, this distribution is based on the Debian stable branch, which is supposed to be a very secure and stable Linux operating system. However, the only downside to this is that you will get an older versions of the software applications pre-installed completely with the distribution itself. Now, this doesn't mean that you're going to run an outdated software, even though it's going to be lagging a few versions behind the official releases. However, the software that you get on most Debian platforms is usually very thoroughly and completely tested to make sure that it is completely free of bugs or any problems. And aside to that, you can always choose to install the latest versions of some applications from other sources, which we will also discuss in this video. Also, for those of you privacy-minded individuals, we will also discuss if Deepin is actually invading on your privacy or spying on your personal data in any way. I see many people online are actually complaining about the issues related to the privacy and abuse of personal information with the Deepin operating system. Now, this kind of discussions has generated some heat over the internet for some time. So we will actually investigate and see what is happening behind the scenes. So make sure that you watch this video until the very end. Now, I have just downloaded the latest ISO from the official Deepin website, and I have started the installation inside my virtual machine. So here I'm going to choose the first option to start the installation of the Deepin operating system. And there we go. And the first thing that we need to do is actually choose a language for the installation. So here I'm going to choose English. And before I click agree to the terms of service and the end user license agreement, I would actually like to take a little bit of time to investigate the privacy policy, and let's see what it actually says. So here I'm going to click on this Deepin OS user experience program license agreement. And let's scroll down a little bit. So this is the part that I'm interested in, about the privacy policy. So it says that if you're participating in the program, that Deepin will actually collect the data on your device in accordance with the agreement and privacy policy. So let's actually take a look at the privacy policy now and see how Deepin is actually collecting and using your personal information. So I'm interested here in the first part of this policy. It says how we collect and use your personal information. So when you use the software products and services, your relevant personal information will be recorded and stored automatically in your local devices, including network identification information, such as your IP address, MAC address, etc., device information like the motherboard type, BIOS manufacturer, CPU information, memory information, hard disk partition, etc. Also, information from the operating system itself and the software that it is running. So as you can see, they will collect data on almost every part of the operating system. However, here in section 1 it says personal information you voluntarily authorize us to collect. And it says that only when you actively enable the corresponding business feature can information of this kind be transmitted through the server to Union Tech software for processing. Your refusal to enable such features or provide corresponding personal information to Union Tech software will not affect your normal use of the software. So such business features include the user experience program that you can enable or disable. So it basically says that if you disable or disagree with this user experience program, well, then this personal information will not be collected. And also, down here, you can see in the section 1.2, there is the Deepin ID service, which is actually a cloud service that is provided by Deepin, which is similar to the Google Cloud services. And if you agree to these services, then you authorize Deepin to collect user information, which is probably no different than how Google collects your data. So you can continue reading this privacy policy if you like, but I'm actually not going to spend time on this. We are going to proceed with the installation, and I'll just click agree to the user experience program and agree to the privacy policy. Yes, I'm installing this on a virtual machine and I do not care, so it's all good. Anyway, for those of you who might be still concerned about the privacy even after reading the privacy policy and the user's license agreement, rest assured we will deep dive into the system and see what is going on behind the scenes, as I have just previously mentioned. So let's actually proceed with the installation now. I must say that they have made a great job with the installer itself. It's pretty much straightforward and easy to use. Also very nicely designed. Now, here are the sections where we are supposed to create our partitions. We have two options. We can either go with the advanced way and specify our own partition layout, or we can just click to install it on the full disk and everything will be done automatically for us. The full disk installation will be perfect and ideal if you are a beginner in Linux, or if you do not know much about the Linux partitioning schemes. So for this demonstration, we will go with the full disk, and I'll simply click here to select the disk. And whoa, there's too many partitions here. Okay, so let's see what this scheme is all about. So we see two boot partitions. I'm not sure why they did it this way, but I think it's just because of those system backups. So we have the EFI partition, and then we have another boot partition for the Linux images and the grab settings. Next is the root partition. And by the way, this is an 80 gigabytes of virtual disk. So the root partition is automatically set to 15 gigabytes. And then there is this root B, or another root partition, which is actually reserved space for backups. So the way Deepin is actually doing this is that they have reserved this secondary root partition to serve as a backup, as a total backup of the primary and original root partition, in case something goes wrong after installing system updates. So that's a little bit too much, I think, and it is a waste of space. I think they could have got it better with the timeshift application and maybe using the BTR or Btrfs file system. But anyway, it's a convenient way, even though it is a waste of space. Next, we see the data partition, and it's 26 gigabytes in this case. So this is the partition that will contain the user data in the home folder. Next, we have a recovery partition of 11 gigabytes, which will actually serve as probably saving recovery images or snapshots from either the operating system or the boot partition. And whoa, these Deepin guys are really serious about recovery options. So congratulations to that. And finally, we have the swap partition, which will take 11 gigabytes of my hard disk space. And I think that's overkill. So even if you're doing the most intense system hibernation when you're supposed to save some data within the swap in case if you don't have enough memory, I think that the at least 4 gigabytes should have sufficed. But I suppose they want to make sure that everything goes smooth at the cost of your disk space. So anyway, let's click next and proceed with the installation. Okay, so we can read the details and click continue. And now we wait for the operating system to get fully installed. I'll simply pause the video and then resume after the installation has finished. And finally, the installation is done. So let's click reboot now and see what we have. Okay, let me just quickly turn off the display scaling. And yeah. Nice startup logo, by the way. Okay, so let's choose keyboard layout. I'm actually not going to bother with this and just go with the English US. Select time zone. Okay. If I can just point and click. Yep, there we go. Username. TLT. Deepin 20 for my computer name. Let's provide a password. And of course, choose a display picture for my user account. You know what? These actually remind me of those from Windows XP, actually. Maybe some of them are even the same. Well, never mind. Okay. Now for the Ethernet, I'm actually going to use a manual IP addressing. So I'm going to change to the Google's DNS servers here. And there is a specific reason why I'm doing this in this case, but it actually doesn't matter. So I'm all good to go. Click next. Applying changes to your system. Please wait. What are these guys from Wuhan laboratories brewing this time? And finally there's the login screen, so let's log in with the username and password now. Friendly reminder. It has detected that you are using a virtual machine which will affect the system performance and operations. Yes, I know, so I'm still going to choose the effect mode here, even though my system is going to be a little bit slow in terms of graphical performance, but however we'll be able to see all of the available eye candy that comes with this desktop. So let's click on that. And there we go. We have a nice Deepin greeter here. Just going to turn that off. And I must say, first time and out of the box, this looks beautiful. The panel immediately caught my attention. Okay, and with all of this fancy transparency going on, and these nice curved edges, it looks really, really beautiful. Okay, so let's see what we have, but first, I have to change the wallpaper. That's the first thing that I do every time. Really, really good selections of wallpapers. I'm not sure who is inside the Deepin customization team, but they have really done a great job of really choosing maybe the best wallpapers out there that you would probably like to have or to use. Some of these actually remind me on those stock wallpapers that come pre-installed with macOS. But anyway, I think I'll go with this wallpaper. Okay, that's done. Now let's see what we have, and let's first start with the panel here. So in the right corner here we have the trash bin, and then we have the power button, which will obviously switch between the states of hibernate, reboot, shutdown, logout, etc. etc. Not going to use any of that. Next we have the clock and the date. Let's click on that, and we get the calendar. Nicely done. Okay, next. Yeah, this is the onboard keyboard. Onboard keyboard. It's actually called onboard, but I meant to say on-screen keyboard. Next to it, we have the notification center, which pretty much reminds on Windows 10 notification center. But right now we have no notifications that are displayed, so I'm just going to close that. Next, there is the tray icons, which we can choose to hide or unhide. It's actually quite convenient. And the tray icons are just your standard tray icons like the networking, the sound controls, and what is this? No input window. Oh, okay. Oh, I see. This is actually the controls for the keyboard layouts. So if you're using multiple languages and you have to switch between different keyboard layouts, so this will be actually the tray control icon from where you can do that. Okay. So let's see what we have here on the panel as predefined applications. First, there is the control center, and we'll get to that in a moment. Next, we have the calendar, which we just previously saw. There's the music application. And this is a nice music application that is actually developed by the Deepin team. So I currently don't have any music inside this virtual machine, so I'm not going to add anything. Next, what we have the album. Also a native Deepin application. At least I think that we should have some pictures inside the pictures folder that we can actually import. Let's see. Wallpapers. Yes, we do. So let's see how that works. I'm going to click here on import photos and choose the wallpapers. Nope. Oh, okay. So you have to select the folder and click open. And there we go. We have just imported our first folder of pictures. So let's see how this works. Nice. Really nice. I like how it gives you this small icon previews of every picture that you have. You can click on them and just use the left or right arrows. Probably the keyboard will work as well. Yep, it does. Really nicely done. I actually like this Photos application. Okay, so what we have next is the App Store, and we'll get to that a little bit later. Firefox is of course pre-installed as the default browser on many Linux distros, and in this case that is true as well. So we have Firefox. Let's see which build it is. So let's go to Help, About. Ouch. This is a really outdated release of Firefox. If I'm not mistaken, I think that the version 80 is the latest one. So probably we will get that with the updates. So we'll have to run system updates anyway. And that is the first thing that you also need to do when installing any Linux distro, and that is running system updates first. So we'll see which version of Firefox we're going to get. Next, there is the Deepin File Manager, which is also a native and very beautifully done application from where you can manage all of your folders and data. It really does remind me on the GNOME File Manager, or basically it reminds on any file manager that you can use on Linux. For example, here you have your recently opened documents, files, or folders. You have the home shortcut for your desktop documents downloads, and the same shortcuts are just laid out here on the left pane. There's the computer from where you can access the root partition, and the home folder again. There's also these computers in LAN, and this is probably running Samba service in the background, which is the reversed engineered Microsoft's server messaging block technology for sharing files and folders. But thankfully you can use it on any Linux system as well. Now I do not have any computers within my local network because this is only a virtual machine. But in case if you do, you should be able to see all of the other devices that are currently on a network by clicking here on this Windows network icon. Yeah, really nicely done. All Deepin applications are nicely done and uniformed within the entire user interface, giving this wonderful user experience that somehow reminds on both macOS and Windows, perhaps. I'm not actually a fan of rounded corners, but I still think they look beautiful anyway. So let's close that and see what we have next. Okay, so it's the multitasking view and the show desktop. So probably if I open several applications, we'll be able to see how the multitasking view functions. Yeah, it's going to be a little bit slow because this VM's video card has a terrible performance when it comes to 3D accelerations and rich display features, but anyway, it's still doable. Okay, and let's also open up the album application. And when we click on the multitasking view, it will give us this nice overlay from where we can select applications or maybe drag them into different workspaces. For example, I can have my music application in workspace number 2, and if I click here on the plus icon, then maybe I can also have my photos application in the 3rd workspace. So we can easily browse and choose in which space we want to work. So yeah, maybe this is a nice workflow where you can have your apps opened in different workspaces and simply select them from there. And all you have to do is simply click on this multitasking view and you can easily switch between applications and workspaces. Yeah, nicely done. Although I must say that this feature is not exclusive to Deepin. Being able to operate within several workspaces is actually a feature that almost every Linux desktop has had in the past and still has. I might actually not like that the applications are shown as icons rather than a screenshot of what is currently going on the screen in behind the scenes. But I think that may be a result because of my graphical poor performance. I'm not sure, but it doesn't matter. So let's close all of the applications right now. And yes, of course, there is the show desktop icon. So when you click that, all of the applications that are currently opened and occupy your space should be instantly minimized, exactly as you do it on Windows and other operating systems, or other desktop environments for that matter. Anyway, let's move on and see what we have next. Now, the Deepin desktop, as I'm aware, offers some customization and a few modes from which you can select. So if we click here on an empty space on the panel, we'll get this menu from where we can choose several other options. For example, maybe we want to switch the location of the panel to be at the top, or maybe at the left side, or at the bottom. You get the idea. Really common theme that exists in almost every desktop environment. Now here at the mode switch, you can choose between fashion and efficient mode. So we're currently using the fashion mode. Let's see what the efficient mode does. And instantly you get a panel layout, which is very, very similar to the taskbar that you have in Windows, actually. And if I'm not mistaken, this here in the lower right corner is the Show Desktop that you can click. And yes, it is. It behaves exactly as in Windows 10. So maybe you will prefer it in this way, but in my case, I like the fashion mode better because I really like how this looks. It's really nice, modern, and polished. So let's see what else we have here. Status. Okay, we can choose if we want to keep it hidden, or the Smart Hide option should automatically hide the panel if there is an application that is supposed to overlap or come at the top of the panel. So let's open something in full screen. And yes, that is exactly what it does. It automatically hides, and if I simply push this window down here at the bottom, yeah, it will always hide. Okay. And finally, you have all of these plugins that you can enable or disable. For example, maybe disable the trash can if you don't want it there. But I'm actually going to keep everything here. Let's actually check the applications menu, or the launcher as it is called here. So let's click on that. And we get a nice slim menu selection from where we can select all of our previously opened applications. Here on the left pane, or the left section, we can select between the shortcuts, which are for our computer, documents, pictures, music, videos, and downloads. So this will take you to those corresponding folders if you click on them. That's right. And here we have the control panel, or the settings, the power button again. Next, we can browse the already installed software on our computer by clicking on the all categories here. And simply we can select any application from its corresponding category. Like, for example, if we click here on the Internet category, we'll see that we have the Firefox web browser and the Thunderbird email client. So let's go back. Let's see, for example, what we have in Office. Now we have some document viewers, text editors, and LibreOffice completely pre-installed in this release. And probably everything else related to the system settings will be found here. And in the other category, you'll find every software that is installed separately and that does not belong in any of these categories. Anyway, I would like to add a few more applications here on the panel. So I'll go to System, and of course I'm missing my terminal. So I'm going to right click on that and send it to dock. And let's also add the System Monitor, which is a useful utility to check your system resources. Let's see what we have next. Maybe add the calculator as well. And I think that should do it. Okay, so now that we have added our favorite applications down here at the panel, we can also rearrange them in any way we like. So we can simply click and move them to the desired location. So I'm going to position them maybe like that. Okay, and let's see the other menu options that are actually available. Now, in terms of menu customization, some of you may not like this small, slim menu, but prefer maybe to have a larger menu or a grid view. And I think that can be achieved by clicking here in the right corner of the menu. So you see these arrows. So if we click on them, we'll get a nice grid display of applications, which is similar to maybe GNOME, for example, or Android. And by clicking on the dots, you can simply browse through the application, or you can also, I think, scroll the mouse wheel up and down. Yep. This is a very convenient way of displaying your applications, in my opinion, because this is probably the way that I would set my desktop because I like to open up all of the applications in grid mode and simply point and click everywhere I want. You can also revert back to the small or the slim menu by clicking the arrows here on the upper right corner. Or there is also one more alternative option. So if you click here on this menu in the left upper corner of the screen, you will get a similar layout. However, just like in the menu launcher, you will see all of the available categories that you can choose from, and you'll find each application belonging into its own category. So maybe for some of you, this will be the preferred way of listing applications. And I think these three options should satisfy your application launching preferences. So I'm just going to revert back to the original menu style here, because I'm obviously not going to use this system inside a virtual machine. And maybe now it's a good time to have a look at the control center. So let's click on that. And at first glance, we can see that all of the options are nicely laid out in this grid style view. So let's begin with the user accounts. Let's actually maximize this window for better viewing experience. And here we already see the user account that we have created during installation. But if you want to create other user accounts, you simply have to click on here on the plus sign, and this will basically take you to the user creation options. Now we are not going to create another user account because the process is actually the same like we just did during the installation. But something that you might actually be interested to change here is the auto login and the login without password. If that is how you prefer to log in into your desktop, then you might want to simply tick these two options and enable that. Me personally, I think that is a security risk, so I'll never do that on my machine. And please stop asking me for the password every time. It should have been at least temporarily remembered within the keyring of passwords, but never mind. Let's move on and see what we have next. And here is the Deepin ID that I have discussed in the beginning of this video. Now here you can obviously sign in and create an account if you want to use the Deepin Cloud, which will sync information with the App Store, the email client, browser, and other cloud storage services, etc. etc. Now we see here that it is currently only supported in mainland China, and I'm actually not going to bother and create a user account. And even if I could, I wouldn't use this cloud service because for privacy reasons, I like to run my own cloud on my own private server, and so should you. By the way, if you're interested about doing that, you should stay tuned to this channel, and I will show you plenty of ways of how you can organize and protect your privacy and run your own services. Anyway, next we have the display option. So from here we can select our display resolution. We can choose the desired brightness levels, maybe change the color temperature, etc. etc. We can also set the display scaling. Next you have the usual settings, the refresh rate, and some settings for the touchscreen. And since I have none of that, let's actually move to the next section, which is the default applications. And from here you can set your preferred application for opening web pages, email client, text editor, music application, etc. etc. You can set and define all of that in this section. Now next comes the personalization, which you might be actually interested in. And from here you can select and choose between different cursor, icon themes, fonts, and of course the overall user interface theme. For example, you can have this light theme that is currently activated, or maybe we can switch to the dark theme. And I think this maybe looks better because I prefer dark theme settings myself. And there is also the option of auto switching depending on which time of the day you're using. For example, in the morning you'll get automatically switch to the light theme, and at nighttime the system will automatically switch to the dark theme, which is a really nice feature. So I'm actually going to keep the dark theme for a while. And you also have accent colors that you can assign for the menu selection options. And again, this also reminds of those settings that you find on the macOS. But nonetheless, this is a really nicely done and a nice touch, I must say. Now the window effects here actually control that fashion and normal mode. So if I turn this off, I think I'm going to get the squared windows, and all of the translucency and special effects will be immediately lost, which is also not a bad thing, because right now, even this is a virtual machine, it runs a lot more smoother and faster. On a real system, I don't know, it depends. Whether you want to use a flat look or whether you want to use a nice, fancy and polished transparent look, so you can control those settings from here. So I'm going to revert back to the fashion mode. And there is also a slider from where you can control how much transparency you want, which is another nice touch. And yeah, I actually like this. I like this better than the previous option. Now here you can choose the Windows minimize effect, so nothing special. We all know what the magic lamp does. If you don't know, go ahead and experiment on your own. For the icon theme, here we can select between a few factory built-in icon themes. Now the current one, the Bloom, is from the current Deepin release, and these Bloom Classic are from the older Deepin releases. And nice of them that they have also included the famous Papyrus theme, which is quite popular on many Linux distros. I'm actually not going to switch between these themes. You can have fun and do that yourself. You also have different mouse cursor themes that you can choose from, and fonts. Speaking of fonts, I think the Noto Sans is really a nice font, so I would like to keep my system with this font actually. Next, we have the network section, from where you can control your network cards, VPNs, proxies, etc. etc. For example, maybe you would like to use manual configuration or an automatic configuration if you have a DHCP service from your router or anywhere else. You can of course define this here. If you are somebody that uses DSL, which I doubt, you can add a DSL connection here. Also, a VPN connection can be added by clicking on the plus sign. And let's see how many VPN types are supported out of the box. So there's the usual level 2 point-to-point VPN-C. There's also OpenVPN, which I would recommend that you use on your private server and not on the services that you see advertised over the internet. And there is the Strong's one and OpenConnect. So yeah, there's plenty of choice for VPNs. Okay, let's see what we have next. Okay, system proxy, application proxy, network details, from where you can see your network information, the IP address, default gateway, primary DNS, and I think that I have changed my primary DNS. Why is it still the same one as my router? So let's quickly correct that. And it's still set to auto. Strange. Let's go with manual again. Now I run my own DNS server on the network, but in this case, I'm going to use the Google's DNS because my DNS server uses very specific caching options. And for this demonstration, I would like to simply use the Google provided DNS service. So it doesn't matter. Okay, so let's quickly check if I have internet connectivity right now, because we will need this for later. Yep, yes I have. Now next we have the notification section, from where you can configure if you want a notification to be displayed for each and every of these applications. So it is a very efficient and granular system of choice and control, which I also like. So right now I'm not going to bother setting any of this. But anyway, let's see how the notifications look like, because I have already received a couple of notifications, if I'm not mistaken. And yes, there are 9 notifications that can be currently shown if we click here on this bell icon. And we can review everything by simply clicking on the category. And we can also clear everything in one sweep. So that's nice. Let's move on. We have the sound settings related to the speakers, the choice of output device, microphone, some advanced settings here for the output and the input, and the sound effects, which we can turn on or off. Let's see what we have in date and time. And of course, you can set your time zone and system time here. For the power options, you can choose when you want the monitor or computer to suspend and control other power settings, especially for those of you that are thinking to run Deepin on your laptops. Let's see what we have for the mouse. Pretty much the usual controls, the scrolling speed and button configuration, acceleration, etc., etc. In keyboard and language, you can define multiple keyboard layouts here in the layout and the system language. You can also see all of the available shortcuts that you can use while using the desktop, of course. So for example, the launcher is activated by pressing the super key on the keyboard, or that should be the Windows key, and that's it. You can actually do plenty of things. There are lots of shortcuts that serve a real good purpose, especially this one, the clipboard, which can be accessed by Control, Alt, and V. So let's actually see what it does. I think I'm missing my text editor here in the panel, so let's quickly add it. Let's type something, test 1, 2, 3. Let's copy this. And let's open up the clipboard. So it's Control, Alt, and V. And yeah, another panel opens and all of the clipboard history will be conveniently displayed here. And you can simply point and click to instantly copy that previous clipboard information. So that's all good. Next is the Update Center, from where you should run your system updates. And we'll run system updates right away. But first, let's see what we have here in System Info. And of course, it tells you about the operating system, which version of the Linux kernel is currently installed, the amount of memory that you have, and this additional license, what is this? Okay, so this relates to the general public license, which is fine. This is a free software license. And here we have the end user's license agreement, which you may or may not bother to read at all. And in the general settings, we can configure the startup delay or the grub bootloader theme that we want displayed, which is a nice touch, but probably most of the people are not going to bother with this anyway. And finally, we come to that user experience program that we talked at the beginning of this video. And this relates to the end user license agreement and to their privacy policy. So let's click on that. And here, as you can see, there is a checkbox that you can tick if you want to join the user experience program, by which you agree that a lot of your personal data, such as applications, Deepin ID, cloud settings, etc., and everything that you run will be collected by the Deepin servers. So in this case, since I am a privacy-minded individual, I will simply opt out of this by turning this option off. Okay, and since now this is out of the way, we can finally try and run system updates and see what we have. Let's first click on this update settings. And here we see that all of these options are automatically on right now. So the system will do automatic checking for updates, clear the package cache of downloaded applications. It will also display update notifications and download updates, so you would want to keep all of these turned on. So let's finally click here on check for updates. And it says fail to update. So let's see what might be the problem here. I usually prefer to run system updates manually on any Linux distro, because when running them from the terminal, you can actually see what's going on and you can easily spot any error that might occur. So let's actually make this font a little bit bigger. And I'm going to run sudo apt update to refresh the local database cache information, provide my superuser password, and yeah, I see where the problem is. So one of the repositories is unreachable. So it says here the repository community packages Debian printer eagle release does not have a release file. Okay, so let's quickly correct that. I'm going to try to locate this information within the list of repositories, which is located inside the etc folder. So I'll grep for printer inside etc apt, and I'm going to do this recursively. And here is the file. It's in apt sources.list.d printer.list. So we need to edit this file. Do we have vim here? Yes, we do. So sudo vim. And by the way, if you are doing this on a real machine, and if you haven't used the vim editor before, I suggest that you go with the nano editor instead. It will be much easier for you. Well, let's actually go with nano in this case as well. So etc apt sources.list.d directory printer.list, and I'm simply going to comment out this option and disable it, so it will not interfere with the rest of the update process or with the other repositories. And yes, I'm going to write that file, and right now I'm going to run apt update again. And of course, we have to be root or super user to do this. And we see that 11 packages can be upgraded. So let's do sudo apt list -- upgradable to see which packages we can update. So there's an update for the Deepin desktop. That's a new one. Disk mount, file manager, and some other libraries. So I'm not going to run the updates from the terminal because I think they will run fine right now from the graphical user interface. So I'm going to exit from the terminal session and retry the same operation again. And yes, now the update information has been refreshed successfully. So all we have to do is click here on install updates. And now, as you can see, the system is doing that backing up procedure. So right now, the entire root directory will be cloned into that reserved alternative root directory, and probably some images from the grub bootloader and other system settings will be moved to the /recovery partition. And this will make sure that if something goes wrong during the system updates, you can actually revert the system to the previous state. The only thing that I dislike about this operation is that if you choose automatic partitioning, it will actually take a lot of space. Besides, Debian operating systems or other Linux distributions that are based on Debian should be really well tested and stable, so you shouldn't have to worry about system updates too much. The time frame or the window of system updates on Debian-based systems will be quite small, and you are not going to receive updates very often, like it is the case with distros that are actually a rolling release distros. But anyway, it is still probably done because of convenience for those of you that are actually new to Linux. And the Deepin team simply wants to make sure that your system runs stable and smooth all of the time. And yes, this is going to take some time, much longer than a usual system updates, because of the backup procedure. So I'm not sure how much I'm supposed to wait. I'm simply going to pause this video here and return right after the updates are finished. Okay, so the backup didn't took long. It was actually like maybe 2 minutes or something. And now the system is updating, and overall it was done fast, considering I'm running this virtual machine on an SSD disk, so it's going to be fast anyway. After the updates are finished, we can simply click here to reboot our system. And there we go. So let's actually see how much system resources is the Deepin desktop using out of the box. So I'm going to start the system monitor right now. And we can see that it uses around 800 megabytes of system memory, which is actually not bad and pretty much equivalent to most popular other Linux desktop environments out there. So it's all good. This system monitor is really also one of my favorite Deepin applications because I like how the graphs are shown. And there is also a very detailed information about all of the running services and programs on your computer if you click here on the user programs icon and on the system-wide programs icon. So you can see everything that's currently running and how much memory and CPU resources each and every specific application is using. Now I'm going to switch again to the light theme because I don't think that my video card is giving the best visual results right now. So I think that the light theme would be more convenient in this case. There we go. And right now, let's see all of those privacy concerns. What I'm going to do now is simply run a few utilities that will allow me to monitor the network activity, basically what goes in and what goes out of my machine, and carefully inspect if this computer communicates with the Deepin servers, where exactly it does that, why, and through which service. So we will see all of that information and we will draw a final conclusion about the privacy concerns that are currently a very hot debate on the internet regarding this Linux distro. So I'm going to install several applications that will allow me to monitor network activity, and I'll be right back. Okay, so I have installed a few network monitoring utilities here, and now I'm going to run the same utilities, and we'll see exactly what's going on behind the scenes. So I have the terminal open here, and I have also opened 3 tabs from where we will be monitoring the information that goes in and out. And first things first, we will start with the netstat command. If you notice, I have elevated myself as root because you would want to run these commands with super user privileges, meaning you will have to run it with sudo or elevate yourself as the root account. So anyway, let's get started. The first command that I will run will be the netstat command. I'll make this one to repeat on every second so that I get most accurate and refreshed information on each and every second. And here I'm going to add a couple of flags that will give me the exact details that I want. and simply run that. And right here in the other tab, we'll run the iftop or the iftop command. Here I will press the Shift and the S key on the keyboard to display source information, and also Shift and D key on the keyboard, Shift plus D, to display the port information. And right now, the first command, or the netstat, will give me the exact network input-output information that goes through and relates to each of the services that are started on this computer. And the other command, or the iftop, will give me not only the network information related to system programs and services, but also every network communication that is happening currently on the system. Now, as you can see, there is no network activity at all. Everything is silent. And here in the netstat, the information that you see in the screen are actually our locally open ports related to some system services, like, for example, the SMB and the NMB services are open. This is the service that allows you to have file sharing between computers and devices on your local network. We also have the CUPS, or the Unix printing service, active, and that's pretty much all there is. Well, there is also the SSH server is also active. So everything that's currently active is set with the listen state, awaiting connection, but you shouldn't be worried about any of these because these are all system-related services. So all good here. And we see that in this window, or the iftop window, everything is also silent. Now I have restarted my computer, and since then there has been no network activity, so no spying, no sneaking, no privacy invasions, and so on and so on. So let's see what happens when we run several Deepin applications. And if you remember from earlier, we have also disabled that user experience improvement program, which should stop the operating system or the native Deepin applications from collecting any personal data from your system. So let's start a few Deepin applications and see what's going on. Let's start first with the file manager and see if something happens in the background. So the file manager is currently open, and there's nothing yet. I'll leave the Deepin store for later because I'm sure that that one is going to pull some network connections. Let's try the album right now. Whoops. There we have it. We see here that one of the Deepin servers is actually connected to our machine, and that was briefly. That happened briefly, right after I opened the Photos application. So let's try that again and make sure that it's coming from the application and not from other Deepin services, like, for example, the update service. So let's start the album again. And everything seems fine. So that network connection to the Deepin servers was not related to the album. Let's try the music one. Still nothing. Nothing over here as well. Let's try the calendar. Let's try the control center. And briefly for a moment there was a network activity. Probably it's some small check that is performed between the operating system and the Deepin servers. So let's see what's going on again. Yeah, briefly, for a fraction of a second, there was a connection established. So if we go here, we can see the IP address of that connection. So let's run that again. It's 104 something. Yeah, it's this address. It's actually these two addresses, establishing network connections to our computer each time when we run the control panel. Let's try that again. So it's this one. Let's see if it has any reverse DNS host associated with this address. Not really. But we can also do some other background checks for this IP address. So let's Google IP location. And let's paste that IP right there. Yeah, so this IP address belongs to the Baidu USA LLC, which is Beijing Baidu Netcom company. Yeah, probably related to Deepin, of course. Let's also check the entire network block that belongs to this IP address. So we will go to the ping.eu site and simply click here on whos. Paste that IP right there. RBFT. Yeah, there's a whole block of IP addresses that is currently leased to this company. You can see all of the network information, just as they want to see your network information. So you can do that anyhow you like. Pretty fair, don't you think? Okay. Now all of these established connections are because of the Firefox web browser, which is completely fine in this case. Now, since I have closed the Firefox, well, actually I didn't. Let's just close that. And now this will revert to the time wait states, and then they will disappear. So let's see the other network activity that's happening right now. And this is pretty much network activity related to DNS searches, the websites that we have currently visited. Nothing so serious right now in this moment. The way I see it, this control panel is simply briefly checking for a fraction of a second for some settings within this control panel. It might be something related to updates, or it might be something related to the user experience program that we have just turned on. And as you can see, the application is right now is open, but there is no network activity. Now let's open up the App Store and see what will happen. And as you can see here in our network statistics, we see that the Deepin App Store is actually making several connections to our computer. We can also see the same activity, which is done over HTTPS protocol, and you can see exactly on which port on your system this application is running and it's connecting from. So let's grab one of these addresses and simply run a search again. So copy that. Let's do dic-x and look for reverse PTR records. And of course, there's none associated with it because these are simply service machines. But the way I see it from here, they are actually using the Alibaba Cloud, probably, which is, of course, another Chinese company that is in direct competition with Amazon Cloud Services. And of course, they would choose that. So let's do another background check. So again, IP location. Paste that here. And of course, we're connecting somewhere in China right now. The connection is established towards the Alibaba Cloud Service. Let's check one more IP address. So let's search for the App Store. Okay, it should be this one that we haven't checked, which is on a different network. Let's see what we get this time. Oh, this one is in Germany. And this IP address is provided by this company, ofdc.com or something. Maybe it's a cloud hosting company. Where are we connecting right now? Okay, obviously it's going to be in Chinese. What the hell is this? Probably a hosting company. But anyway, that's also related to the Deepin's App Store. So normally, when you open up the Deepin App Store, it will connect to their servers from where you can actually download their apps. And speaking of the App Store, I really hate to say it, but it is actually really, really good. I mean, look at how easy it is to install an application from here. And the user interface is also nicely done, and everything is nicely organized and selected in all of these different categories. And this to me looks like an Android or an Apple App Store, except it's very, very slow because most of the connections are outgoing somewhere in China, as we have just seen previously. So let's actually install something. Yeah, it's taking some time. I'm not sure if you can hear, but my machine is really struggling to resist all of the spying and privacy invasions. So let's install. Okay, let's install Telegram. Wow. Now that took like a minute or more, I think. So let's see. Also, I'm interested if these applications that are found in the Deepin App Store are actually the latest versions available of the apps, or are actually an older versions kept in their repositories only. So this one is 1.5.11-2. So let's Google for the latest Telegram version. You know what? Let's just check the Arch Linux website and see what's in the AUR, because we're obviously going to find the latest versions of every package inside. Telegram desktop binary, oh, 2.3.2. And this one that we have just installed was which version? 1.5.11. Ouch. That's like ancient. I was kind of hoping that the Deepin's App Store is keeping a more recent versions of every application that you can find, but I was mistaken, and I'm so really disappointed right now. Oh well, let's kill this thing. Okay, let's see what's going on. So everything is back to time wait, and the Deepin App Store is still active. However, there are no connections established to our computer since we have closed the application. It's only in the listening state and not in the established state. So let's see what's going on here in the iftop. All the usual activity that is going to disappear very soon, just as I said so. And well, you know what? I actually don't like this application running, even though it is doing nothing, but it is still in the background, and I have closed the program. So now I'm going to have to kill it. So let's do process searching ps-aux, and let's grab for this process number. That is the App Store daemon. So let's kill that right away. Process number 10626. And there we go. We have kicked the Deepin App Store out of our system, and it is no longer active. But anyway, the way I see it, the Deepin operating system is actually establishing connections to the Deepin servers normally when you open up the App Store, and there's nothing unusual or no malicious activity whatsoever, so it's perfectly fine, it's perfectly normal. We have seen that every now and then there is a brief instantaneous connection that's happening towards the Deepin servers, probably checking for updates and nothing more. And also we have seen that there is a brief instantaneous connection when we open up the control center. So it gets activated and then disappears. Yeah, probably quickly checking for a few settings that are defined within the control panel, and that's it. Now you can see here there is an established connection to the deepin.com, which relates to the control panel, and however this is no longer active. So nothing to worry about again. This one will disappear in a minute or two anyway. And there we go. Everything has just disappeared. So what's happening behind the scenes? Nothing really. We haven't made a Deepin cloud account, and we have opted out for data collection, which means that the only connections that are going to be established from this computer or from this Linux distro towards the Deepin servers are exactly in the moment when you activate the App Store and when you want to download something from there, or if you have an active Deepin Cloud ID subscription. In that case, yes, they will harvest your data. But if you opt out and if you do not use the App Store, well, then you're perfectly safe. So as you can see, this Linux distro is no scary at all for those of you who are privacy concerned individuals. But if you are still hesitating whether you should use it or not, but you really enjoy and like the Deepin desktop and all of the beautiful user experience that it gives you, well then, in that case, you are not required to download and run the Deepin operating system. You can simply install the Deepin desktop environment on any other Linux distro. You can put it on Ubuntu, you can install it on Debian, you can install it on Fedora, you can install it on Arch, you can pretty much install it on every major Linux distro, and you will get the same experience. Except it will be without the Deepin Cloud ID, without their user experience program, and without the App Store. So if you want to run the Deepin desktop environment, you can still enjoy it and be perfectly safe by simply switching to other Linux distribution. In my case, I would prefer running and installing the Deepin desktop environment on Arch Linux, because on Arch I will always get the latest packages. So I hope that this clears the privacy question regarding this Linux distribution, the Deepin 20 based on Debian stable, and you're pretty much free to choose whether you want to use it or simply use the desktop environment in some other Linux distro. So the final verdict here? Well, in my opinion, I think that this is a really, really great, if not the best desktop environment right now, as of this moment, available for the Linux desktop. It is very modern, up-to-date, nicely polished, and beautifully done. So I really enjoy it, even if this is only a virtual machine. But the only thing that I dislike about this distro is that it actually comes with older versions of the software applications. However, this being based on a Debian stable means that all of these applications that are pre-installed and that are available for installation are supposed to be free of any bugs or glitches. Therefore, they should provide the most enjoyable and smooth experience for the end user. Also, another thing that I dislike about this Linux distro is the automatic partitioning scheme, which takes a lot of space. So if we examine here, if we do ls block to list block devices, and then if we do disk free-h, yeah, we can see that we already have 15 gigabytes plus another 11 gigabytes plus another 11 gigabytes, which should summarize in total of 37 gigabytes of wasted disk space used for backups. But it is actually quite alright for those of you who are beginners with the Linux operating system, because this will make sure that your system runs fine after each and every update that you make. Anyway, if you have enjoyed this video, please make sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe. And I'd really like to hear your opinion about this Linux distro. So please leave me a comment down below, and I'll see you in the next one. Stay tuned to this channel.